All right, so in this last video dealing with 1.1, as we will do throughout the course, right, and this is why you want to have your textbook handy when you're watching these videos, we're going to be dealing with some exercises from the text. I also want to note for you here that I have taken the text and scanned the pages that we're dealing with and put them into my iPad here. So if you don't see me actually holding the textbook, that's why. I'm still looking at the same thing you are. So, most particularly, as we will do almost in every section, we will always take on problem number 2 from the first set of exercises from these different sections. And so I'm going to be looking at that now. Exercise 1.1, Roman numeral 1, and then problem number 2 is what we're looking at. And so do note that all of these exercises will fall at the end of the sections, and then they have sometimes multiple exercise sets, and they're all demarcated with a Roman numeral 1 or 2 and so forth. At any rate, you can be looking at it, I'll read it here. Since the good, according to Plato, is that which furthers a person's real interests, it follows that in any given case, when the good is known, men will seek it. Now, we are told in the instructions that that is in fact an argument, and our task then will be to identify the conclusion and the premises. And there are a lot of instructions here. I will again just tell you that when it comes to the exam, all you'll need to do would be circling the premise or premises and then circle the conclusion, leaving out indicator words or anything that's not a statement, right, not providing evidence for a conclusion. Don't circle any of that, and then labeling them appropriately. So in this one, right, we actually, and to help us with this, right, we want to look for the indicator words, and to help us with this one, right, we see the phrase, it follows that. And so it follows that is a conclusion indicator. And in fact, I would recommend that at least until you get familiar with those conclusion and premise indicators, you put them on maybe a 3x5 card so that you have them handy as you're working on these exercises. So it follows that as a conclusion indicator, and so we would get for the conclusion then, in any given case when the good is known, men will seek it. Just that last bit of number 2 is the conclusion. We also find a premise indicator, right? The very first word is since, in this case being synonymous with because, meaning because. So our premise then would be the good according to Plato, and note here, we don't have the premise yet. A premise has to be a statement, has to be something that can stand independently as true or false, right? So the good according to Plato would not be our premise. The premise would be the good according to Plato is that which furthers a person's real interests. That would be our premise. So we have one premise and one conclusion here, and we will always have one conclusion, by the way. Any given argument has just a single conclusion, and that's how we deal with that one. So we can try other examples here on the video. So number 3 here, just to get another idea. Number 3 here says, as the denial or perversion of justice by the sentences of courts, as well as in any other manner, is with reason classed among the just causes of war, it will follow that the federal judiciary ought to have cognizance of all causes in which the citizens of other countries are concerned. The mouthful, right, from Alexander Hamilton, as you see there, the noted hip-hop artist, right? Not really. But anyway, there's the Broadway musical. Never mind. So we're looking in this one for any indicator words, premise or conclusion indicators. The very first word is as, right? As is on our list of premise indicators. But note, right, the word as appears multiple times in this passage. We also see the phrase as well as. Those instances of the word as are not premise indicators because in those cases they're not being used to mean because. Whereas the very first instance of the word as does mean because. And so we have as a premise here the denial or perversion of justice by the sentences of courts, as well as in any other manner. And note, we don't have a statement yet, so we need to keep reading, we need to keep going to get our premise, is with reason classed among the just causes of war. All of that would be our premise. Now, then we find it will follow that. Now again, that's the conclusion indicator. So our conclusion is that, the conclusion would start with the federal judiciary ought to have cognizance of all causes in which the citizens of other countries are concerned. Right? So again, one premise, one conclusion, and these indicator words tell us very nicely where those would be found. Okay, if we can get to the next page and look at number 11, this is the last one I would do out of the text for now, but it's an important problem here. Number 11, again, is an argument. We have to find the premise or premises and the conclusion. So number 11 says, profit serves a very crucial function in a free enterprise economy such as our own. High profits are the signal that consumers want more of the output of the industry. High profits provide the incentive for firms to expand output and for more firms to enter the industry in the long run. For a firm of above average efficiency, profits represent the reward for greater efficiency. So there's a lot going on there. We look in that passage for any indicator words, right? Well, we do see the word for come up multiple times. And by the way, if you find that I'm going too fast on these, please remember you can just hit pause and look at the problem yourself for a bit before you kind of hear me explain how to answer it. Now, the word for appears multiple times in this passage, but in every instance, it's not being used in the sense of because. So that word for actually in this passage is not being used as a premise indicator. In fact, there aren't any indicator words in this particular problem. So what do we do in that case? How do we determine the conclusion? Well, do note that sometimes it'll simply be obvious. That, like the George W. Bush example from the last video, right? It was obvious that that first statement was the conclusion. In this passage, I'm not so sure it's as obvious. And so to help us with this, we can do what I call the therefore trick. And it works like this. I assume that when you read this passage, you at least have a suspicion that the conclusion is maybe the first claim or maybe the last claim. At least that's how this one often breaks down. Well, what you do is you put the word therefore in front of whichever claims you think are likely to be the conclusion, and then restate that whole argument so that that claim comes at the end, if it didn't to begin with the word therefore in front of it. Then what you're going to be doing is asking yourself, where does that word therefore seem to fit most naturally? So here's what I mean. Let's say it's the first or the last claim, right? Let's try it with the last claim first. What we would get is, profit serves a very crucial function in a free enterprise economy such as our own. High profits are the signal that consumers want more of the output of the industry. High profits provide the incentive for firms to expand output and for more firms to enter the industry in the long run. Therefore, for a firm of above average efficiency, profits represent the reward for greater efficiency. So now hold that in your mind, and we will try it the other way, where we're going to put the first statement at the end with the word therefore in front of it and see if that seems better. So it would read like this. High profits are the signal that consumers want more of the output of the industry. High profits provide the incentive for firms to expand output and for more firms to enter the industry in the long run. For a firm of above average efficiency, profits represent the reward for greater efficiency. Therefore, profit serves a very crucial function in a free enterprise economy such as our own. Now, when you hear both of those and kind of hold them in your mind, I'm thinking that in fact that first claim seems to fit better as the conclusion. The word therefore sits more naturally in front of it than it does in front of that last claim. At any rate, that's how the therefore trick works. Now, once we've been looking at these arguments, the conclusion has often come at the end or maybe the beginning, but do note that the conclusion can come at the beginning, middle, or end of an argument. Also, people often ask, well, how many premises could there be? And in fact, note that there can be any number of premises in an argument. There's no limit. So now that we've looked at 1.1, right, you're still at home, right? I often give this advice to my face-to-face students, but work on the starred problems, right? Certainly when you're working on these exercises, start with the starred ones because you have very easy access to the answers in the back of your book. After you do the starred ones, right, then you can move on to the non-starred problems, which are a little bit, it's more of a challenge to get the answers to those. But again, that gives you a procedure in terms of how to practice this material. Finally, here in section 1.1, in exercise set, I just want to note for you, in exercise set 2, those are also arguments, but because those passages have not been written by professional writers, they are more challenging to pick apart. So just be prepared for that. And in fact, those are really excellent exercises to work on. They're an extra challenge, and I will tell you that this material that we're dealing with now, which will be on the first part of the exam, is some of the more challenging material on the exam. So do exercise set 2. Exercise set 3, of course, is got define the following terms, right? It has a bunch of terms there from the section, asks you to define them. You should be able to define them after you read the section and after my presentation here. But do understand that I won't ever ask you to define terms on the exams, so that's just not going to be part of that. And then finally, you'll note here that in exercise set 4 from 1.1, those are true-false kinds of questions, or short answer kinds of questions. And I do want to let you know that we won't be doing any true-false or multiple choice in terms of the exams, at least, right? So you won't need a Scantron. You will not need a Scantron for any of the exams in this class. You'll be doing your work on sheets of paper that I give you with the problems, and in fact, in almost every case, it'll be essential that you be showing your work, and so that's kind of how the exams will run and how the exercises will work.